Hi, I'm John Nixon from Eagle Lake Woodworking. Welcome to part 2 of the video series on how I constructed an arts and crafts style bed. This video focuses on the horizontal rails that make up the frame and panel assembly. They have an integral tenon on the end, and the headboard and footboard panels are identical. I'll show you how I got a matched piece between the top and bottom rail using a resaw technique, as well as how I cut this inverted V detail on the top of each frame and panel assembly. Let me show you how they're made. Okay, to make the horizontal cross pieces at the top and the bottom of the frame and panel construction on the headboard and the footboard, I needed some 1-inch boards. All I had on hand was 3/4 inch, but I had some great looking quarter sawn white oak. So what I've done here is I've glued up 3 3/4 inch boards with the nicest looking one in the middle. And what I'm going to do is resaw that on the bandsaw. And so when I split it apart, I'll have a mirror image of my best looking quarter sawn white oak board, and then I'll use one for the top rail and one for the bottom rail. And they'll be a matched set and look great. Here at the bandsaw, I've set up my resaw fence as well as my old resaw fence just to serve as kind of like a feather board on this side. So it'll guide the board through and support it on both sides, and we'll saw the board right down the middle. I've also set up in-feed support and out-feed support on the back side of the bandsaw. This will help me support and guide the piece as I run it through the saw. Now a board 6 inches like this is asking a lot of my little bandsaw, but when it's tuned up, a good blade, and set up square, it should do okay. I'll bring the boards to their final dimension using the wide drum sander. I use this technique on quarter sawn white oak and other highly figured woods that are prone to tear out when you use the planer. This is a lot less aggressive, and you can sand. It takes a lot of time, but eventually get to your final dimension. So now that we know the finished thickness of each panel, it's time to cut the groove in the bottom of the horizontal rails. And I'm going to do that at the table saw. I've set the fence a distance to make a pass on one side, turn the board around, and make a pass on the other side, and this will center that groove. With my 1/8 inch kerf, it'll take 3 passes to plow out the groove for the panel. After creating the dado, I'll check the fit of the panel. And what we're looking for is a fit that's not too tight, but not too loose. That looks good. With the dadoed edge against the fence, I'll rip the lower horizontal rails to their final dimension at 5.5 inches. What I have here are the 2 sets of boards that we resawed on the bandsaw to create a book match set. Now, these boards represent the horizontal rails on the frame and panel construction, the upper and lower horizontal boards on the headboard and the footboard. Up until this point, they've been the same, but here's where they differ. The upper board is narrower and has a smaller tenon on it, and the lower board is a little wider. Now the upper board also has that inverted V detail as well. So we're going to start with the lower boards, the lower horizontal rails, and create the tenons on those, and then move on to the upper boards, create that inverted V detail and the smaller tenon on those. To form the tenons on the end of the horizontal rails, we use a combination of cuts on the table saw and the bandsaw. The first step in the process, I've clamped a board here at the crosscut sled that's 2 1/4 inches from the blade. And we're going to make the shoulder cuts on the workpiece. So I bring the workpiece in, butt it up against this stop block, and then we'll run it through, creating a shallow 1/4 inch cut that's the shoulder cut. We'll flip the workpiece over this way and make the same cut on the other side. After those shoulder cuts are done, we'll go to the bandsaw and cut off the cheeks of the tenon. The next shoulder cut on the edge of the board we use the same stop block for, but we raise the blade more to cut in an inch, and that'll leave a 3.5 inch tenon when we make that cut on this edge of the board and that edge of the board. So it's the same procedure, just that the blade's at a different height. After making the 4 shoulder cuts, we're ready to head over to the bandsaw and remove the rest of the material, leaving the 1/2 inch tenon in the end of this board. So I've set up a fence here that's 1 inch away from the blade and a stop block behind it, and I'll make these first cuts in like this and remove this portion of the board. The final cut's very similar to the other, but we positioned a taller fence 1/4 inch away from the blade, same stop block concept, and we'll cut the slice off the cheek. I just finished laying out the inverted V detail on the top of the horizontal cross rails that go on the top of the headboard and the footboard. Now it's a really simple detail, it's just a taper from the center on out to the sides. And I did it by measuring the overall height of the top piece at 4 inches and then on either end at 3 inches and just connected those with a straight line. Now rather than using a taper jig to cut this out on the table saw, I'm going to use a technique called pattern routing. I'm going to cut this out close to the line on the bandsaw, and then I'll affix a pattern to it and then use a bearing guided flush cut bit on the router table to bring the cut even with the line. The results are great, it leaves a nice smooth finish on the board. And the nice thing about a shape like this inverted V is you really don't need a pattern at all. In fact, we're going to take some double stick tape and put it along the line and then use a yardstick as our guide. With the first board routed to its finished shape, I can use that board as a pattern for the second. So I just stick it on and use the same procedure, and I'll get an exact copy of the first board. While the 2 top rails are taped together, I'll take this opportunity to sand them too. Well, that does it for this part of the video, but I invite you to check out the all-new Eagle Lake Woodworking to see the rest of the videos in this series and videos on other woodworking topics.